Hey, what's good, everyone? If you're a trader or you're learning to trade, it can be so frustrating to arrive at the charts and see that you have just missed the beginning of a trending move. And so in the session that we just wrapped up, my dad went through the top 10 signals that we have on how to re-enter a trade that is already running. So buckle up, get ready to take some notes, and check the video description as well because they'll be typed up in there. But enjoy this session and we'll see you on the inside. Alrighty. Welcome everyone. Tuesday night, ready to rock and roll. Tonight is going to be an exciting one. Dad has got an absolutely fired up training for us, one that we've been waiting for a long time. Did it about a year ago almost. So how to enter a trade that's already moving. So we're going to dive into that in just a moment. Before we do, you all got given an update in your MACD as well today. So that is in place. That'll dive into what that looks like in a bit. And also, welcome if you're joining us as a guest. I know we put this out to the Facebook group. So if you're joining us tonight and you're not part of our team already on the inside, really great to have you with us. And Andrea, special welcome to you who just joined us earlier today as well. So great to have you with us also. But I don't want to waffle, guys. I know it's December and things are starting to ramp up towards Christmas, but the markets are still presenting opportunities. And as well as things begin to wind down, you enter towards, maybe having some leave. It just gives you more time to hone your skills here. So one day you won't have to go back to work. That is the plan, right? So anyway, enough waffling from me. Stacked out house I can see on Zoom right there. So Dad, I can see you. I'm going to add you to the show over here. And we are going to rock and roll. I know there's loads you want to get to tonight, and it's going to be absolutely loaded. So without further ado, over to you.
All right, here we go. Welcome. And again, welcome, Andrea, just joining us, and anyone new. Great to have you with us tonight, and trust you will get something out of the training. Training is always good if you want to become successful in trading. So I'm going to jump straight in and share my screen. Ty, is that all good to go? There we go. There, share the screen. Always got to move a few things around when that happens. Okay, there we go. So what I'm going to jump in first, before we start the training, I just want to quickly show quick MACD update. So it's a very small update, but I think it's pretty powerful. And it's mainly around, there's two things. One slight tweak to something, but the big changes are triangles. So we've got triangles up and down. You can see that plot on the 0 line of our MACD. So there's up, we call them reverse re-enter. And I've kind of been fiddling with these actually in the last year. The first kind of edition that came out with like version 1, sort of 2 and 3, and even part of version 4, there were too many false signals. I mean, our goal with our indicators is that every signal can potentially lead to a very good entry for a very good trade. So I spent a lot of time and I've tweaked around. And then when we first launched version 4 of the MACD, there were two past the entry point, past the bottom of the trade. So I've really tried to work on them so that we have a balance between hardly any false signals, but then when they do plot, they're big moves. So if we just look, so you can see in the indicator, if you go under inputs, you will see there it's got reverse re-enter signals, white triangles. And then of course, everything you can change. They're over here too. You can turn them on and off, change the colors if you want, but white seems to stick out well. So I've really tried to fine tune them so they don't plot often. When they do plot, there are a lot of pips. So if we just look at that, and we're going to come back to these in terms of re-entering a trade, but we can see one plotted here just after the open, and from that white triangle, we can see price rocketed up 200 pips. Now, I'm not saying enter on these. Sometimes it's not appropriate to enter, but look, the next one plotted, reversed, and that then dropped how many pips? 250 pips almost. Then another one plotted here, and from that we can see price moved up 113 pips. Now you will get ones that don't really create a signal. That one was straight above our 2584. But if you just peruse through, there's a triangle up there, and from there we didn't get another one all the way. Let's see, that went up 76 pips. Then we get this triangle down. You can see they're very fast spaced, and that trade from that triangle down, we can see there was a huge drop, but continued to drop after that, but 180 pips. So those white triangles are very accurate now to predict reversals. That's can almost say that that's really telling you if the MACD is really bullish or bearish. So from that triangle up, definitely our MACD is definitely bullish mode. From that triangle down, it's bearish mode. And occasionally you will see them, when you see them plot in bright colors. Here's a good example. Look here, we can see here we got a triangle down. I mean, this is a good signal in a sense. We got a bearish crossover on the 3 times higher. But when you see a white triangle down in bright red on the histogram, that's a good sign price is going to move further. And likewise, I mean, may not find an example quickly, but likewise for a triangle up, if it's in a green bright histogram bar, it's a sign of a good move. So that is, we've really polished those up. So you'll find those very helpful. And especially they will combine with signals. Occasionally, this didn't quite work here with the counter trend and there was no buy signal there. But if you see one of these triangles combined with a signal, then it becomes a really high probability trade that is going to move and really get you some pips. So keep a lookout for that combined with a buy or sell signal or with maybe a counter trend signal. They're very helpful. Then I did make one other little tweak. I mean, basically, there are not enough plots in the MACD for every single line of our pivots. So I've just adjusted the quarterly. They hardly ever appear, but I have been saying that the R3, R4, S3, S4 are the most important ones. I mean, through all the time frames. So this is quarterly. So I've just tweaked them around a bit that you can edit S3, S4, and R3 and R4. And I've done that. If we just go right to the end here, we'll go back there. Where's price meandering now? If I just turn on my pivots here, I showed you how to customize them the other week. So it's just you have the main pivots. Okay, so you can see here, there's R3 with a dotted line. Let's just see if we can find a quarterly pivot. You can see they hardly ever appear. There's R4 quarterly, so I've made that a dashed line. And if we just go down the other way, you'll see they hardly ever appear, but it means now you can edit the R3, R4, S3, S4. Gee, they are miles away, out of sight. So they hardly ever appear. All the labels will be there, but there's R3. That's way out of play right now, and I made that a dotted line. So those are the little changes I've made, and I'm sure you'll find that helpful. So really keep an eye on those triangles. They're really, really helpful, especially to talk about tonight, re-entering a trade. So that is the gist. Let's go back to that open move. There's a few things I can pull out there. Now I've got 10 points. All right. So we're going to look at 10 points at sort of the 10 commandments of entering a trade. So it'll be a little bit jumbled on it, moved around the screens a lot. But I mean, basically there's an important rule. One important law in trading is no late entry. That's one of the gold rules. And there's a saying in trading, I didn't make it up, but it's that, entering a trade late is like trying to catch a falling knife. So we never want to enter a trade late. But there are times where it is safe, And I know it's frustrating. You may wake up or whatever time you get up, whatever, maybe in the afternoon or evening you trade. When you turn on, the computer, you look at the charts and the move's already taken off. And you think, oh, I've missed it. And sometimes moves can last for an hour, 2 hours, and that can be very frustrating. But there are ways you can safely re-enter a trade that's already moving. And so I want to look at that tonight and look at 10 points and then have a close look at how we can enter trades safely. So there are a lot of points and I'm going to make, a lot of information here, but everything is recorded. Ty edits everything, puts it on the Zoom. But just bear in mind, one of the trainings I did, probably about a month back, that the average move has about 3 waves. Sometimes it may only be one, sometimes I've counted 12. We can see this big move down that, what time this kind of turned around 10 to 8 this morning. You can see this one just kept going. There was a wave and then another wave, another wave, another wave. It just kept, there were multiple waves. So just bear in mind that when you want to re-enter a trade, have a look back and see how many waves have there been in the trade. If there's more than 3, then that's already above average. Then it does become risky. So keep an eye on the waves. Basically, there are a lot of things we can look at tonight. So, I mean, the first most important rule is wait for a pullback. That is the absolute key. Because whenever price pulls back, it gets energy. So whenever it pulls back into one of our trend zones, so we're all familiar with what our trend zones are. I mean, this is not a great example, but we can see, here, let's just start from a random place. We can see price rejected. This line here is one of my levels from a 4-hour chart. We can see price began to move up. I mean, if you were looking at that point, you can think, man, I'm going to jump in this trade. But you can see already price has moved quite far away from our main trading trend zone. I mean, it's not the ideal setup anyway. I just want to make a point here. That would be dangerous because where's your stop loss going to be? If you entered on a trade like that, I mean, this is not massive, but you'd need to have, a safe stop loss, maybe bigger than what you need. You would wait for a pullback. If no pullback comes, then I would always stay out. I cannot emphasize enough how important a pullback is. So if I enter a trade, I'm always looking for a pullback into the trend zone. So I mean, here's not the best example, but while I'm on, we can see here price broke up, would have been dangerous to enter there, but then look, there's a big pullback. And this is a great pullback because we can see this pullback into our 8 times, this gray band here is our 8 times higher trend zone. And you can see I'm always looking at what the trend zone is doing in this pullback here. Look at this pulling back. Look here, can you see it's expanding? That means, and because I'm on the 1 minute here on the Dow, that means 8 time frames higher. That means, price is getting very bullish and is accelerating. So whenever price pulls back into a trend zone, it's always getting liquidity. So always say these are liquidity zones. Look here, price pulls back. I mean, this is a bit ugly over here, but price pulls back into the 3 times higher trend zone, rockets up. Here again, pulls back. Now you can't see, but it's overlaid, but it pulls back into the 8 and it pulls back into the 3. It gets some liquidity, shoots up there. And likewise here, pulls back into the 8. The 3 was crossing over. You can't see, the circle is hidden somewhere over there. But a safe entry, this would have been a safe entry because price has pulled back into liquidity. And you can see price rocketed up. There was 50 pips after another pullback. Now let's look at, so that is the best pullback. I mean, you can maybe classify different kinds of pullbacks. So the best pullback is when price pulls back in a zone, higher than the main trading trend zone. So obviously blue and bullish is our main trend zone. When it pulls back into the 3 or the 8, that's a good sign of a move, especially, if it pulls back in the 8. There was a pullback here, so you could have also re-entered. You can see here our 21 is huge for support and resistance. So we can see here, look at these candles, 1, 2, 3, 4 candles. 4 candles pulled back, couldn't close below the 21. So that is a good sign that is a safe entry. It didn't pull back, so ideally would have liked a pullback into the 3 times higher zone. That won't happen every time, but at least it pulled back into our main trading trend zone. And we can see 5 minutes, it couldn't break below, massive support. That means if you did take this trade here, you could have entered there and you could have had a tight stop. Look, you would have just needed only a 10 pip stop loss would have been safe. And you could have done a 2-to-1. I mean, you would have got easy 2-to-1 over there. But if you held your nerve, there was, to the top, there were 33 pips there. So pulling back in the trend zones is huge. So always look for that. So we always wait for a pullback. Always, again, to see them as bands of liquidity. They really are bands of liquidity. Whenever price pulls back, generally, there is a move. And we will look at this bullish move too. There were times it did pull back. Sometimes it pulls back into space. That didn't quite kiss there. But I think we'll look at further down later on. You will see when it pulls back, even when it's a bit inverted, there's still liquidity sitting there and it'll bounce off. So here we can see it pull back, kiss 3 times higher, then there was a price drop. All right, so that is the first commandment is, look for a pullback, and the higher the zone it pulls back in, 3 or 8, the greater the chances are that trade is going to move. Then the second commandment for re-entering a trade is there a signal. So it's something that I'm very strong on. I'll always look for a signal when I'm re-entering a trade. And that is the strength of TrendForce, that there are multiple signals and multiple opportunities to re-enter trades based on a signal. All the signals in TrendForce, they're there. It won't be perfect because nothing is, but they're all designed to give a boost of momentum, to be able to get you into sort of a risk-free position very early after re-entry. And so I will just go through all the signals and we'll look at some examples. So obviously, I think I've counted about at least 12 signals in our indicator that you can use. And I actually thought before the end of the year, I want to do just one training on every signal, go through them in detail and explain how they work. So, I mean, obviously there are buy or sell signals. So we can see sometimes price pulls back And here we get a sell signal that obviously there's a great re-entry point. You've actually got a sell signal. You may ask about this one. What was wrong with this signal? There was a kind of a pullback, but you can see down here, look what's happening. The histogram is still green, which means we're still more bullish than bearish. So that would have made that, amongst other reasons, high risk. I think obviously our MACD trend zone 3 times higher there we can see was bearish. But the point I'm making is that you can look for a sell signal, buy sell signal. Then you also get our little wedges. So you get buyer and seller momentum. So we can see here price pullback. We'll come to this rejection a bit later, but we can see those can be valid entries. Whenever you see these little wedges, there's a bright one meaning stronger. That one wasn't a huge trade, but there we can see there was 33 pips after that little wedge. So we look for them. So here, this would have been maybe a little bit late, 3 candles. But look here, this entry candle, we got the histogram turning bright green. That's a signal. After this pullback here, what have we got? Histogram turning bright green. That's also a signal. I mean, there are so many signals. We can also see when price goes, when our EMA 13 is also very strong in terms of predicting a move up. So we can see here, if you ideally this would be a good entry, but hey, the histogram's gone, the 13's gone bright green, is a bit late, but you're not too far away from the trend zone. You could have, taken a quick 15 pips there if you want to take a risk. It could have been, a fairly tight stop. You wouldn't have got 2 to 1. Maybe you'd need to put your stop maybe on you could have almost, if you held it out, you could have got a 2 to 1. And so we got the EMA changing color constantly. Whenever there's a pullback, look here, this was not a major pullback, but look, we can see the 13 here, our bearish 13 EMA, it went dark. Then look here, it goes bright on that candle. So that candle went bright. That would have been a safe entry, and that dropped 72 pips. So that 13 is very strong for re-entering a trade, sometimes a bit hidden, but if you hold, I think there's a way you can see it. How did I do it? You can, put the mouse on another EMA. You can see this went bright red on that candle. There's a bearish doji bullish pattern. We'll come to that. Histogram went bright on this candle, and you've also got seller momentum there, and that trade dropped hugely. I mean, the other factors you had to take into account, but I'm just picking out the signals. They're huge. Also, looking for crossovers. When the trend zones cross over, I mean, sometimes they can be slightly obscured. Here it is hidden behind the 21, but we can see there is a bearish crossover. So 3 times highest crossed over. That is a strong signal. Although we're a little bit far away from the trend zone, on that crossover, price dropped 58 pips. So there are signals firing, all the time. Of course there are. I mean, I don't know if I can find an example. I'll go through it in more detail. People have asked about the lightning bolt. We may have to go right back to where we are. So sometimes re-entering a trade on a lightning bolt, that's when price breaks through a previous line of support or resistance. There's another signal. And also when we break through the opening range, so once we break through the 15-minute opening range, we get that explosion. That can also be a valid entry signal. So there are multiple signals firing all the time, plus our candles. When the candles go to a bright color too, that's also a signal. I mean, this was quite late, but I mean, this would have been more risky, but price still fell, 33 pips after the candle went bright. Yeah, let's have a look over here. We can see here the candles are all dark. Look at this candle. Once those candles go bright, price tends to move. So that could have been a valid entry. There we can see price dropped off a cliff there. 150 pips. There we've also got a signal. We've got a bearish crossover. I mean, they are everywhere. So I'm always looking, for those signals. And likewise in the MACD. Now, the 8-time high can be more risky. So when I'm looking for crossovers on my trend zones, I'm mainly looking for 3 times higher. I mean, that one would have worked. There was the 8 times high, but sometimes, obviously, the 8, that will lag quite a bit. So that does become more risky. So I'm looking a lot for this turnover, this crossover here, bearish or bullish. So there was a bullish crossover. You can see it's hidden behind the candle. So that could have been, you can see there it is, it's hidden behind the candle. That's also a valid entry because 3 times higher trend zone crossover, there's likely to be pips. And likewise, we look too. Now, sometimes it can be a bit messy because things are overlaid, but I'm also looking for, crossovers on the MACD. So when there's a bullish crossover, I think I mentioned that one, there's a bearish crossover, that can be a sign, an entry signal too. So, I mean, they're everywhere. And of course, the current zone can also be when there's a crossover, that can be a sign for an entry. So, I mean, they're just everywhere. And I mentioned early triangle up and down, those can be, they're a little more spaced apart, but here's an example. So, I mean, this was, already our MACD had crossed over current zone, but you can see on the 3-minute and the 8-minute still, these two zones still very, very bearish. So look at this candle. We got a lot happening here. We can see we've got triangle down. We've got a bright histogram bar. We've also got seller momentum. That price was definitely going to drop. And I think we looked at that earlier. There was, 33 pips there. So is there a signal? I very seldom enter a trade without a signal. I'm always looking. There may be an exception now and then, but 99% of the time when I re-enter a trade, I'm always looking for a signal. And I said there, I think I mentioned about 12 different signals. So re-enter, look for a signal, and that's definitely going to give you a bit of a boost as price moves. Then the third, number 3. So number 1 was wait for a pullback. 2, is there a signal? Then number 3, this is really key. I'm going to blow up our table. This table is amazing for re-entry. So let me just make it one size bigger. So for those who knew, we can edit the size of our force table. So we can see I've got it on normal. I'm going to turn it to large. It's almost going to look like giant print. And actually, now that I'm on that table, I want to have another look at the table, because I've noticed people that have got Macs, the circles are very small. So, they've got a Windows. So with, I know with Apples, everyone with the Apple, the circles fit nicely. And I obviously did the coding with an Apple, but what I may just work at, it won't be difficult, is actually just have an option to make these circles one size bigger. And I think that'll help those that have got, look at that. So 15, while we're looking, 15, the MACD's just crossed over and it's gone bright green. Let's just look at the 15-minute to see what's happening. At this moment, it may not mean much, but where's price hiding? Okay, so let's go. MACD's just gone to bright green on the 15 minutes. So here we go. So this circle has gone bright. So it would have been dark green. We've already had the crossover, but that's telling us now that the MACD has gone bright green. So there's a chance now, well, on the Dow that could move up, although it's very counter trend. But this table is huge. Let me just go back to the 1 minute. This table is giving us signals all the time. And so I'm always looking. I think I've emphasized, well, just the point I've made now is that the MACD can either be dark green, dark red, bright green, or bright red. We can see here, there's a let me just close that. What's that doing there? We can see there's a combination here. There's dark red and there's bright red. And so when this circle goes bright green, that means the histogram has gone bright green, provided that it's already bullish. So that could be, if you can't pick it up there, look on the table. And likewise, when you've got the MACD green and the TrendZones green, the 21 is green, that is what produces a buy signal. And so maybe things are a little bit counter trend, so you may not necessarily get a buy signal. But I'm always looking at these lights, especially if I'm re-entering a trade. I'm looking carefully to see in one glance, what is the state of the current trend? And this, in one glance, this table really tells you exactly what's happening. You can see, from our circles, what is happening. So it's a good way to re-enter. Again, the 21 has got 4 colors. It can be bright green, or it can be dark green, bright red, or dark red, as is illustrated over these time frames. So often the 21 going bright could be a safe way to enter a trade. So I'm always looking at that table. What is the table telling us? And that is giving us multiple signals. Almost every, except for zone alignment, almost all of these are actually a signal that could end up being a safe way to enter a trade. So I'm always looking at the lights. Then the other key that I'm looking at, let's just go back to when there's some more volume. Before I re-enter a trade, let's find an example from where things will move. Well, let's just pick up. There's There's some good examples here. There's two examples I can see. So the next number 4, are there any white pullback lines of support and resistance? That's really important for re-entering a trade. So we can see they're not huge. I've kept them small and white, but we can see here, look, one plotted over here, and we can see a long one plotted over here. Now these are quite big. Although the lines are small, they tell us a lot, because once price closes below, and here I like Heikin-Ashi candles, and they form a bearish candle, that's a good sign that it's safe to re-enter the trade, because that is telling us that that has created a resistance line, and price is unlikely to suddenly reverse in the next candle or so and go the other way. And so I'm looking for those. So here we can see price closed below. Now on this particular candle, there was a different signal we're going to come to. We can see there's the classic Heikin-Ashi reversal pattern. There's a bullish, doji bearish. That would be a signal for me. But closing below, that could have been a safe entry. Likewise here too, we can see here price did spike back a bit, but we can see here, obviously the other things we need to look at, I'm just pulling out a few things. We can see this pullback resistance line plotted, and that meant price is unlikely to break above that line. We can see it did get tested, but couldn't close below, and price fell. Likewise, if you're halfway through a trade, now there's not really another clear signal, but again, look here, we can see here is, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we've gone there anyway. We can see, look at this pullback. There's a reversal pullback pattern. There's bearish, doji, bullish, but also we've got bullish, doji, bearish, and we've got a little support line forming there, resistance line. That means price is unlikely to suddenly pull back. So that could be a safe entry. So I'm always looking for these lines. So let's see if there's another example. So just going back here, there was a big move. We can see here, look here. So price pullback. What's happening here? There's a pullback support line plotted. That could be a safe entry, because we're unlikely to reverse against that. There's another one. So they're everywhere here too. So we can see multiple reasons why we could have entered a trade here. We've got quite a long, so the longer the line, the stronger it is. A strong pullback resistance line, meaning price is unlikely to suddenly reverse. So often if I'm in a situation, I always wait for these lines to form. And where was that little bullish move? I haven't looked here. We can see, look here. So I talked earlier, here on this is the entry candle we looked at. That had, it's not playing nicely with me now, not appearing, but the bullish crossover was there. We can see here is a support line. We can see that means there's strong support here. Price did try to pull back, but look, it would have encountered this level, showing us that is safe to entry. So I'm always looking for those pullback and support lines. I only take buys when I'm above, and likewise, okay, this wasn't the re-entry, but look right at the top over here, we see this pullback resistance line. I'm always looking to be below if I'm going short, and above if I'm going long. So keep a look out for that. So those are little pullback lines. They're very small. I mean, if you just page back, you will see them everywhere. So those weren't really re-entries. Those were single moves. Here's one here. So there was kind of a wave there. And here we can see there's now a second wave. We can see we get triangle down. We get our, what's this, seller momentum. And we can see there is a little pullback resistance line, meaning price is unlikely to suddenly reverse. So I'm looking for those. Okay, here's an example. So here we have pulled away. So this, in some ways, this trade could be risky. Let's just analyze this. We can see price rocketed up. Then there was a big pullback. It rejected the 987. Also, you can see how those wicks are sitting right on the 13. But look what happened. A pullback support line plotted, meaning it's probably safe to jump in. And we can see there was an 8 crossover. I don't always look at the 8, but that potentially could have been a safe place to enter, because if price did pull back, we know that it's unlikely to pull back below that line in the short term. So always be looking out for these white lines. They're huge for re-entering. I'm always keeping an eye on them for a safe re-entry. All right, so we're flying through nicely tonight. So that was number 4. Number 5, this is really important, is what are the state of our trend zones on the MACD. So these main trading trend zones are huge for re-entering trades. So let me just make my table small. That's taking up half. In fact, I'll just hide the table for now. I think we're probably finished. Let me just turn it off for space. So table off. So when we're re-entering trades, it's important to look at what's happening. Now, obviously, we like golden setups, but you're not always going to get all three time frames matched together. So we look carefully at what is the state of our zones. So, for example, here we can see there was a sell signal. There was a no-no for a number of reasons. We can see that the histogram was still green. We can see at that sell signal, it would look like at that point that this pullback, 3 times higher bearish trend zone, was expanding, meaning price was likely to reverse, which it did. So here we get, look at what is the state. If, for example, we want to re-enter here, having a sell signal on a re-entry is normally stronger. So we can see the only problem we've got here is that our 3 times our trend zone is still bullish. But what can you see what's happening here? It's actually shrinking and contracting. And if we looked at the 3-minute, that line on top, there would have been a red line, meaning that the MACD had already turned red, which means although it's green and it's bullish, in fact, the trend is turning. But already we got a nice separation here. We can see separation on our current 1-minute trend zone. And of course, we got a bright red bar. And also our MACD, our 8 MACD is still very bearish. So that would have been okay. So we're constantly looking to see what's happening. So very often you'll find that not all line up. Then we got to look at other things. But I'm constantly looking at what is the state of 3 times higher. So this was the main entry. Let's look at what is happening here. Where do we look at this entry? So let's look over here. Let's just blow it up a little bit. So when we looked at this as a re-entry, we pulled back into liquidity 8 times higher. This is good because we can see both. I mean, maybe not visible on the screen, but we can see if we entered on this candle, I think, histogram going bright, you can see here, what is the MACD telling us? Well, all the zones are bullish. We got a crossover on the current time frame, the 1 minute. We can see the green for 3 times higher, that is bullish, and also 8, a little bit hidden in all the fog, but the 8 is also bullish. It crossed, I don't know, crossed over somewhere over here. But that's telling us that is a safe entry. You know, that is very safe because we got all the zones aligning. In fact, this is close to almost being this would maybe call a golden re-entry setup because everything is aligned and that traded move. So we're always looking at the trend zones. Also look at if they are shrinking or expanding when you re-enter. So we love it when we see expansion. Okay, this wasn't re-entry, but when there's separation and they're expanding, you know, that often makes the trade way safer to enter. So let's look at this. There was 30 pips here. We can see here. So this one, there was some risk. We looked here, but there were some good reasons to still take it. Although we had some shrinkage here, we can see, look at the 8 is still this is still expanding on that entry. So that would have made that a bit safer. So we're looking at all those zones. That's what I love about version 4. We can look at all the zones in the MACD to work out what is happening. And so we keep an eye on that. And also, we also want to, I just wanted to see what else I wanted to say. Yep, so I think I covered that nicely. Then also, we also look for divergence too. You know, that's another key. We always look, now divergence is not a major part of the strategy, but we still want to look to see, is there divergence before entering? That can make a trade safer. So, I mean, there's some hidden divergence here because what we got, I mean, this is a bit more complicated, but those who understand divergence. So before the signal, although the 3 times higher was still bullish, or that was shrinking, we can see there we got a higher high and a lower high, and here we got a lower high and a higher high on our 3-minute band. So that's called hidden divergence. Normally it's the other way around, but when it's the opposite to normal divergence, hidden divergence, that could have made that trade extra safer. So we're always looking, you know, for divergence too, to validate whether we should re-enter a trade. Then again, I did say the color of the histogram can also be a big factor. So this sell signal, I mean, a number of reasons not to take it. I mean, the 21 was pointing up, so our table would have showed it being green, not red. But look at the color of the histogram. You know, we like it when it's bright. Re-entering on a bright, for a sell, a bright red histogram bar, it makes it much safer. So the MACD helps us hugely when we want to re-enter trades. We're looking at the zones, what they're doing. And remember, they always say the high time frames bully the lower time frames. So you'll often find, this is very common, is that the 3 times highs in pullback, but the current zone and the 8 times higher are still in favor, and that can make the trade safe. So obviously we look at other factors, but those would be the keys to look at. Then number 6 is a real key. We're probably a good place to start here. We look at, are there any key levels of support and resistance, any lines that could help us in making the trade safe? Now, there are multiple lines we could look at. So we could look at, has price rejected any pivots? In fact, I'm going to turn all the pivots on for a minute. Let's turn the selected ones off. I'll go to the MACD and I'll just turn all the pivots on, because we can't see the labels when you're looking back. But we're looking to see, are there any potential lines of support and resistance? Has price just rejected a line? I love it when price rejects a line. So here we can see, look at this over here. We've got this classic reversal pattern. We've got a bullish candle, a doji, and a bearish. But look here, this line here is actually from our 4-hour chart. So that is basically the 618. So price, we can see how price tested. It came up. We can see, looking right back, there's been a lot of activity around this fib line I've drawn on my 4-hour chart. So when you get this reversal pattern and it's sitting on a line, that's what I love about high Kanashi candles. Often you get these reversal patterns on a key level, and that reverses. That would have made that a safe entry. And so I'm always looking to see, has price closed below a line? So here we can see, here's a weekly pivot. So I'm not sure what number it is, but we look at activity, always looking left. We can see, look there, 3 candles tested this weekly pivot. Again, look at all this testing. Then again, price closes below. You could have entered over here, histogram, going bright red, potential entry place. Now, it did pull back, but that would give me confidence that price is not going to reverse because it's respected a pivot. So we see that all over the place. So look here again, it comes back up to this weekly pivot. This counter trend signal came, exactly kissed that line multiple times, couldn't really close and move above that line, rejects it, and that gives you confidence that is going to fall. So there's pivots, there's of course all our fibs, there's big round numbers, and I haven't the figure on numbers, don't go far back, but I'm looking for all these lines. I'm looking at the POC. Let's just go, it may not get anything here for the POC. So I'm just looking here. Okay, here we go. It's a bit hidden. See, we've got lines overlapping lines here. But the VAL, look, the VAL is sitting on a pivot. What's that on? No, that's on the support, the resistance line for the opening 15-minute, I think. But you can see here, the VAL, we've got 3 lines overlapping. A trader started, pulls back, and look, it rejects a number of things. It rejects S4 daily. It also rejects a previous resistance zone, that's support line, but the VAL, it bounces off that and then it moves up. Of course, it was tested around the POC, but there are multiple lines. So I feel much safer re-entering a trade when price has rejected a line. So look here. So here we can see price came up, kissed this 15-minute opening zone line. It kissed it, rejected it, and the same time, look here, 8 times higher trend zone. Price couldn't close above, would have got some liquidity there. And look what happens, it produces a signal after that. That is a very safe signal. Whenever price rejects a level, rejects a line, also broke below a trend line, and this trade was at this afternoon. That was this evening. Is it 7 o'clock, 7:05? Look, that trade went nicely down to TP3, nice 27 pips there. So I'm always looking for all these different lines and levels. There's a whole training on it, but I'm looking at the key levels. Let's just see from my 4-hour chart. We can look here. Look at this. So here, this is a daily trend line. Look at this yellow line. Look at how price respected this daily trend line. So look at this. Price comes down and it tests it 1, 2, 3. There was like almost 4 minutes it tried to break through the daily trend line. When it did, bright candle, we looked at this earlier, that dropped 40 pips. So when it breaks a trend line, that is also a key. I'm looking for key levels. Is it rejecting? Is it breaking? Let's just see if we can find another example. I love price action. Look, rejecting it there. Look at that, to the millimeter. Yeah, but here's another example. Did we look at this one? I think we did. We rejected a weekly pivot. So I'm always looking for levels. Let's have a look at that other little bullish run. Let's just see if there was any. Look at the key levels here. Also, obviously, what would have made this one safe, you can see, look at this rejection here. So here we got the same daily trend line. Price tested it twice. A little W pattern, not very clear. But there was a pattern. We can see price couldn't break below this daily trend line. It also couldn't break below our 233, rejected another line, and then it closed above our 987, which is massive. And so those kind of entries are normally very safe, because if price does pull back, it's got a lot of support that it has to break through. So always be looking, for re-entering a trade. Has price rejected a key level? So there was a wave. There was a wave. What made this wave strong again? Gee, this trend line is huge. We can see price kissed the 987, also rejected a daily trend line. It closed below the 233. Multiple conditions made that a good trade. Of course, we did have the 254 in the way, but you can see in wonderful compression whenever you got the 233 close to the 3 times higher zone and the 8 all bunched up. Those trades have a lot of energy. So we're looking also at key levels. I mean, the other key thing I like to look at, I just wanted to highlight, and what I'll do is I just want to go to a clean screen without my normal drawings. So let's just look at where we this morning. Where did that move start this morning? Let me put this on the 1 minute. So fib levels are key. I'm a fib fanatic. So if there's a reason to draw a fib, I'm going to draw one. So let's have a look at this move we've been looking at. And I want to show you just how powerful fibs are. So let me turn off, just to bring some clarity. We don't need, let's just turn off the 233 just to clear the screen so you can see what I'm saying. We'll turn those off. So if we have a look at this move that started, this counter trend signal went off at just before 8 this morning. If we draw a fib, now I know Ty and I draw them slightly differently, but if I went from that high to the first pullback, now and I've got a fib retracement, but mine also extend lower. So I've got a way of doing them. But if we just look at the fib lines, all we're looking at is fib lines and how they may help us re-enter trade. So if we look here, look at this. Here's a 236. Price came up. Now, we hadn't had this line on earlier. We have bullish doji, a reversal pattern coming off a fib. That's always going to move. Let's just see if we can find another example as this trade played out in the day. We can see here again, not as clear, but price, look at that, to the millimeter, the 236 comes down now to the 382. Look, here's another example. 236 is one of my favorites for re-entering trades. Here, price comes up. We can only explain this reversal pattern on the 236. So we got bullish, doji bearish, and look at that, price just dropped all the way after that. So I'm always looking, and those fibs, they last for hours, So here we can see we between fibs. But again, look, here's the 50%. We can see, it would have been very late to enter here, but look at this action around the 50% fib. Price rejects it and then falls. There wasn't much there, 13 pips. It's at the end of the move. But
that self signal by itself, though, breaking the trend line, perfectly hitting TP3.
Yep. It's perfect. Yeah. I love it when it hits TP3.
And not cherry picking. That was an hour ago.
Yeah.
Or almost 2 hours ago.
Yeah. And very close to a golden setup. We were just like a few candles out. The 3 was just lagging very slightly. The 3 crossover was there and there. But still, whenever you see, this is kind of the compression here, and price hitting, 8 times higher and rejecting multiple levels, that was always going to go places. So there was a resistance line too. It's not the opening 15-minute range. There's a resistance line. Price kissed it exactly with a resistance band that was previous support zone. So anyway, so I'm always looking, at those fib levels. They are massive. You can see here, look, price rejected at one fib, went to another fib, spent time at that fib. Price often just moves, between the fibs. So I'm always drawing those. Anyway, I'm taking a lot of time. I need to finish quickly. Then the next one is very simple. What is the angle of the SMA? So that's SMA 21. Now remember, our table will always tell us, but obviously that'll be for the current candle. If it's bright, for example, Here it would have been changing round. It would have been turning bright red pretty soon. So that is the circle in the trend force table. But we're looking at the angle, the price always goes in the direction of the angle. So look at this. Look how sharp that angle becomes. That's only going to move. So let's look at where the examples we were looking at earlier. We can see it's rounding. You're looking for an entry. There's a triangle down. For example, if you wanted to enter on this trade, we'll just ignore the fib for now. Don't want to clutter there was a fib there. But again, we can see here, triangle down. This is a very good entry. This triangle is very accurate. I said earlier, we can see there's a nice angle on the 21. Where was that one signal where we had a sell signal? And I don't know how far we're going back now. Let's go earlier. We can see the sell signal. This you can see what's wrong here, re-entering here, is that we can see the SMA is pointing up. That always means a pullback. So always looking, let's have a look here. We can see, look at this, we can see up. The table would have shown green on this entry if we took that trade, nice angle up. So look at the angle of the SMA 21. Then 8, is there any pattern to confirm entry? So I mean, there are multiple patterns. I mainly just use trend lines, but I mean, you can use pennants, flags. There's multiple signals. So generally, when I enter a trade, I'm always looking to see, can we do a trend line before I re-enter? So let's hear just a random example. If we went from there, we can see here, and what I love about trend force is that whenever price breaks a trend line, I put the magnet on for accuracy, there's often a signal. So that would have validated an entry. Look how price tested that trend line twice on the signal, price broke, histogram, bright red. And we can see that'll happen multiple times. I'm always looking to see if price has broken a trend line. So let's see, I mean, I'm pulling these out the hat as I go. I mean, I'm often changing them on the fly. I'm drawing trend lines all the time. And then while price is moving, I'm constantly moving my trend line. So where was the last big low before the fall? It probably would have ended up there. And we can see price came, retested and broke down. Here's maybe a better example. This pullback, let's see if we can get a trend line in here. So there would have been one we could draw somewhere along here. But again, I'm looking for trend lines, and I'm also doing them on a 3-minute chart. So we can see you could have drawn one there, price breaks and then moves down. So I draw a lot of trend lines. In fact, when I'm trading, I'm always drawing trend lines all the time and looking for trend line breaks. So be open. I'm not sure if we could have drawn one. Let's just see earlier, where were we? Where was that move? Was it over here? 7 in the morning. I mean, we did. There was a bit of a trend line here. We can see price broke through that trend line, more or less on the signal, and then price moved up. So I'm always drawing trend lines before I re-enter trades. Could we have done anything here? I mean, that's not really a re-entry, but I'm always looking. I'm looking for trend lines before I re-enter a trade that's already moving. So here I'm just picking random examples. Let's pick that low. If you move your trend line there, and then price breaks and moves down. So not a big move, but look for trend lines. Is there a chart pattern? Flags, channels, wedges, those kind of things. Number 9, I've covered already. Has there been a classic reversal pattern? I mean, I think on the 3-minute, now this wasn't re-enter a trade, but I mean, this is the signal. This is the pattern, when you have bearish, doji, bullish. And when there's a move down, I'm always looking to see re-entry, especially here's a 3-minute, bit of a quite just almost bearish, doji, bullish, but I'm looking for those patterns all the time, especially on high time frames. They're pretty accurate. So I'm looking, and especially I can't see an example here, but when you see, if you can remember this one, when you see a reversal pattern that's sitting in a zone 3 times higher or 8 times higher, when I flicked over to the 3, I'm looking to see if I can see an example. I mean, it happened quite often. I just can't see one at the moment. Okay, that was around when the stock exchange opened in the morning. But I'm trying to find an example. I won't spend too long. When you see a reversal pattern and look for them inside the zones. They always move. So I can't seem to find one now, but look, they're there. I often see them. So look for them. Look for that reversal pattern. And finally, number 10, This is another key that I've learned. Let me go back to the 1 minute. Look at the candles. Let me just reset the chart view. When there's been a pullback, look at the candles in the pullback and what do they look like? So for example, here we go, price moved down at pullback, and then here's a signal. I'm looking back. What are the candles like? Look at this. Can you see this is a real dog's breakfast. When you see lots of, color changing, often lots of dojis, lots of smaller candles, that's a sign the pullback is just a pullback and it's likely to move again. Let's have a look, see if we can find any other examples. So we're looking back. So, okay, that's quite a strong pullback. But very often what you'll find is when there's an attempt at a pullback, the candles are very weak. And that's a sign that it's not a very strong pullback. And there may be a good chance to re-enter with a strong trend. Let's have a look back here. So we can see here, there was a good signal. That was this morning. What's that? Almost, just before 10. We can see price move down strongly. Then there's the pullback. Look at these candles. They're not really giving us, say, a lot of bullish candles shooting straight up. It's mixed with dojis, bearish candles. So when you see a mixture like that going sideways, then I've got my finger on the trigger, ready, loaded, to enter a trade. Then also, just the last thing I'll close on is don't be lured in by we call them BFOs. Very often I'm trying to see, I haven't looked for an example, but when you get a huge candle, they're often there to sucker you in. So I'm wary about re-entering a trade if there's a huge candle. They normally end up getting into trouble. I'm just trying to see, I can't see an example here. You just need to make a note in your head that, beware of BFOs. These huge candles suddenly shoot up. If you're re-entering a trade, they normally spell trouble. All right, so those were the 10 things. I'll just go through them again. So just in closing before I hand back to Ty. So the 10 commandments, wait for a pullback. Is there a signal to confirm entry? 99% of the time I only enter with some form of signal. What is the TrendForce table telling us? Those circles, are they bright, dark? Is there that little white line, pullback, support and resistance? Number 5, what is the state of the MACD trend zones? Are they expanding, shrinking? Are they in the right way? Number 6, are there any lines of potential support or resistance? Big round numbers. I looked at fib levels, the high time frame EMAs. Number 7, what's the current angle of the 21? It should be in your favor, bearish or bullish. Number 8, is there a chart pattern to confirm entry? Is there a trend line or a pennant or something? Number 9, have we seen the classic Heiken reversal pattern? I always look for that. And number 10, what are the state of the candles in the pullback? They're looking strong, then it could be reversing the other way. But if they're weak with lots of dojis, then highly likely that it's just a pullback and then you wait to enter the trend. So I think I'll leave it there. I've been talking for almost an hour. I don't know if there are any questions. I've been firing away.
That was loaded. So good. I'll have it typed up, guys. So if you're rewatching this or checking it out on YouTube, check the video description for notes in there for those 1 to 10. Hopefully, though, you were taking them yourself. But yeah, writing with your pen definitely burns things into the brain a bit better. There was a lot of gold in there, Dad. I specifically really like the part about when you were referencing the 1 minute, like the shape of the MACD zones, and the 1 minute. So the 1 and the 8 were on trend and noticing a pullback within the 3. I think that you'll see over and over and over again is very powerful.
This was the example here.
Yeah, so you can see there.
Very common.
Yeah, so you can see, the trend zone for the time that we're looking at, the blue trend zone right there before the sell signal is pulling back. I mean, there's so many great things. You had the trend line break you drew, but prices come back and pretty much kiss the 8 times higher, given us the reversal pattern, given us the seller momentum, given us a bright histogram, pretty much bang on the sell signal almost. Yep, bang on. And so all of those things are happening, but at the same time, you're observing the pullback shown in that 3 times higher trend zone on the MACD, that green MACD area, that there, it's price pulling back within the greater trend, which is the times 8 MACD, which is still facing down. So the higher trend is down. We've experienced a pullback. So there's some green on the times 3, and then the times 1 rolls back on trend and gives a signal. That's perfect. You've got trend, you've got pullback, you've got signal. So anyway, I loved how you expressed that right there. That is a really cool pattern to pay attention to. Anyway, one question I'd love to get you on. So because we reset everyone's MACDs with an update, it also reset the pivots. So Marcus and I have been having some fun trying to figure out some of those. We can go rewatch the video, but if you remember super quick what some of those settings were on yours, could you give us a super quick refresh? Otherwise, like the solid, the dashed, the thickness, the etc.
Over here on mine, exactly. So
okay, there we go.
This is what it looked like. So the R5, this would have been here at 50. I'll take it to 0. That means you'll see the label, but not the line. Every R4 and S4, I use two width and a dashed line. And then for the R3, the threes, S3, R3 is the biggest determining factor of support and resistance out the pivots. I make it 3 thick and I go for the little dots, the circles. And then I do that all. So all the others, I have labels only. You just take the color from 50% to 0. It means we'll plot the label, but not the line. And so all the threes, 3 thick dotted, all the 4s are 2 thick dashed. And I do that all the way down. And then I just adjusted these slightly so we could get the S3, S4, and R3, R4. So all the 4s, 2 thickness dashed, all the 3s are 3 thickness and jotted. And then if we look, I'll just crunch up the chart quickly. And let me just change it to 3 minute and go to where price is currently sitting. And we can see here, we can see where we. So we can see always a lot of respect, for these levels. Here we got R3 weekly. We can see again that determined price action. Now, it's not 100%, but here, look, we got this reversal pattern off an S3. And we can see the respect always more than all the other pivots. That's why I've got those dotted and dashed. They are huge in determining price action. So, I mean, sometimes they do fly straight through. I mean, there's a lot of momentum, but look here, look at this. Here's a weekly 4 level dashed. Price couldn't look at this price action. I mean, obviously we got the 8 zone here, but again, this line would have been huge. We can see here, it's kissing this line. So those are the ones I'm looking out for. And of course, all the labels will be there. Let's just go back to where price currently is. All the labels are there, but it just cleans the chart up a whole lot. You don't have too many lines. You can notice, you'll see the lines where the candles are. But you can see here, look at this action on S4 daily. A lot of support and resistance at that level. So that's how I do it.
Very cool. Thank you for summarizing that. That was gold. Guys, if you're wondering where that was 2 weeks ago. The YouTube thumbnail on the video is price action pivots if you want the full deep dive. But thank you for giving us that quick summary because everyone's going to need to recustomize if they hadn't done it. So yeah, guys, loaded. Absolutely loaded. Thank you, Dad. That was massive.
Ooh, no worries.
If you want to unshare, and I'll keep us both pinned, but then at least we'll wrap up from there. But guys, that was probably it for the questions. I didn't see much more. Let me repin myself. There we go. Now we're both over here. Let's check. Just Christopher saying value. Thank you very much. And I saw a few emojis flying up from Zoom earlier as well. So thanks, guys. Appreciate that. And I know we're in December. We still definitely got a couple more Tuesday nights for sure. Then we'll take a couple weeks off, guys. We'll clarify exactly what those dates and times are. But we are here. Like, the markets are moving. Obviously, things might get a little quiet for everyone between, Christmas Day and New Year's. But aside from that, if you have less going on work-wise and a bit of leave up your sleeve, then it's no better time to be studying. And we've got a really cool little homework piece that we're working on that's going to give you guys something fun to do in that backtesting opportunity right there. If you're not trading in between Christmas and New Year, still something really powerful in terms of how to, in a perfect way, recondition your brain to see the right patterns over and over and over again. So working on some cool stuff for that. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your evening and your week, and we'll see you on Thursday morning for our live analysis, which will drop the details in the chat the night before and the morning of. So without further ado, thanks again, Dad. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night, everyone.
Trade safe. We'll see you soon.